Hello, my mystical friends. Step inside the Oracle Parlor. Grab a nice cup of tea and get cozy with me, your host, Fantasma Witch. Let us go on a journey of all things magical, mystical, paranormal, ghostly, psychic, as we discuss both my stories as well as the stories of guests where we can share in this beautiful parlor space our experiences, our beliefs, and our ideas without judgment. Welcome. Cozy up. It's time to sip the magical tea. Hello, and welcome back to the parlor, my friends. I am so excited to have you here today because we're going to be talking about a very important question, which is, do psychics know it all? So, of course, before we get going, just a disclaimer that the following is based off of my personal experiences and my current beliefs. I'm not here to convince you that I had these experiences or make you believe what I believe, but just simply share them with you to get you thinking and to use your own discernment. My beliefs may change from when I record this episode, and that's completely normal. So I will do my best to include references in the episode description if you're interested, or if you have your own questions or stories that you would like to share and possibly have it read on the podcast, you can send your stories to oracleparlorpod@gmail.com. So let's get into it. Today, I wanted to discuss a really common misconception about being psychic, which is if you're psychic, then that means you know everything, including the future. You have to know it all. And I recently actually made a TikTok video, kind of a silly joke video, using a trending sound clip in which uh, I was saying in the video, yeah, I'm a psychic witch. And then the person responded by asking me, okay, cool. Can you tell me when I'm going to get married? And I had to say, oh, I'm not a fortune teller. And they're like, okay, but can you tell me when I'm going to have kids? And this is actually a really common thing that happens when people sit down for a reading, whether it's tarot or just an energy reading. I've even had somebody do this with pet communication, which was really bizarre because I had to be like, okay, well, I'm communicating with your pet. Your pet is not going to predict the future, and neither am I. And so there's just this really big misconception around it. And, we've talked a little bit on the podcast before about dreams and premonitions. And we've also talked about psychic not being a bad word and the stigma around the word psychic. So I definitely recommend listening to those episodes and then coming back and listening to this one because they all kind of tie together in a way that is a nice little bundle. So, yeah, I have many people who come to me for a reading, and, when they sit down, I tell them up front, this kind of work that I do is not fortune telling. I'm not going to predict the future. What would you like a question about? And like I said, people will turn around and then ask me a question about the future, very specific questions. And when I have to re-explain to them that I don't do predictions, they get really confused because they're like, but you call yourself a psychic. And I'm like, yes, psychic and future predictions, fortune telling is not the same thing. So, on occasion, when something difficult or negative happens, especially for the collective, folks will ask me, why, as a psychic, I may not have seen it coming because I'm psychic, and therefore they think I know the future, and therefore I know what's coming no matter what. So let's get into this. Let's start by actually defining psychic, omniscient, and fortune teller. And this is according to Merriam-Webster Online, which the links again are in the episode description. And yes, there's a reason why I included omniscient. So, psychic is defined as lying outside the sphere of physical science or knowledge, immaterial, moral, or spiritual in origin and force, sensitive to non-physical or supernatural forces and influences marked by extraordinary or mysterious sensitivity, perception, or understanding. A person apparently sensitive to non-physical forces. That is the definition of psychic. Then we have omniscient, having infinite awareness, understanding, and insight, possessed of universal, complete knowledge. And then lastly, we have fortune teller, someone or something with the supposed ability to foretell future events, and especially the details of a person's future. So, both the act of being psychic and fortune telling require knowing the unknown through unexplained means. But the key difference in those definitions and in the act itself is that psychic is not defined as being future predicting. It is not defined as fortune telling, whereas fortune telling is that exactly to the definition of knowing the future, of knowing and predicting what is to come. Both are done through unknown, unforeseen, unexplainable, non-scientific methods. And that's why they're similar and there is crossover. Psychics can tap into energies, they can communicate with animals, spirits, entities, be it of this world or the next. And they do all of this through using their extrasensory perception, ESP, otherwise known popularly as the clair senses, the psychic senses. And fortune telling can use the same exact ESP, extrasensory perception, to tap into future prediction. And we will talk a little bit more about my ideas and beliefs around future prediction later. But let's just focus on this for now. So, again, there is crossover between being psychic and being a fortune teller. But the key difference is that it's important to know that just because there is crossover, it does not mean that all psychics are fortune tellers. Similarly to how not all witches are pagan. And if you don't understand the concept, or you may not have heard this before, not all people who identify as a witch also identify as being spiritual or religious. To be pagan is to be spiritual and religious, which also means that not all pagans will describe themselves as a witch because they may not do practices that fall under the witchcraft territory. These are umbrellas, but under those umbrellas, there's different categories. Same idea when it comes to being a fortune teller or being a psychic. Psychic is an umbrella term, and fortune teller can fall under that. But, just because psychics have the ability, they could predict, it doesn't mean that they do. And there could be many different reasons for this. So, some of the reasons may be that maybe the psychic is not well trained in the ways of predictions, and therefore they don't feel comfortable doing it. And I know that may sound kind of weird. Like, what do you mean psychic training? Well, it's just like tarot reading. Tarot reading falls under the umbrella of psychic. It really does, because you're using your intuition. And again, we've talked about intuition and psychic before. They're very much the same thing. They're just different words. We have kind of supplemented the word psychic for intuitive recently because of the ickiness that the word psychic has. Again, go listen to the previous episode. It will make a lot more sense in context. So, you know, um, because of this, not everybody feels comfortable with feeling trained enough. That's what I was talking about. I had to gather my thoughts. So, with tarot, the example I was giving, with tarot, yes, you could pick up a deck and you could just immediately start reading, but it's going to take time and training, whether that's self-development, self-reflection, personal growth, doing your own work, or taking classes, taking workshops, working with other people, giving sample readings, getting feedback. Growth and progress still needs to happen, just like any skill set. Any skill set requires that you sit and practice. And the same can be said for psychic work as well. And, there's a whole other topic I could talk about being born with it. So I will save that for another episode in which we will talk about being born with it in regards to being a witch or being a psychic intuitive. So we're not going to dive too deep into that. But the idea here that I'm trying to get at is that, just like art, I used to be an artist in animation. I was not born with it. I did not come out immediately doing character designs ready for animation. I had to learn, I had to grow, I had to develop. And the same thing can be said for any psychic sense, any psychic ability, whether that's, doing tarot readings, pet communication, mediumship, or fortune telling. And I want to make it clear that I'm not opposed to quote unquote fortune telling, but I do have thoughts on it, and we'll get into that. So, yeah, one of the many reasons may just be that the psychic is not well trained in predictions, so they don't feel comfortable in doing it. Another is that they may not be interested in offering readings to other people about the future. And it may just not be something that they offer publicly. And this is the category that I fall under. I don't have the training to actively pursue predictions. And I don't feel comfortable with offering those things publicly to others. And there's a lot of reasons for that. I have my own personal reasons, and others may have their own reasons. So for me personally, one of the things is, which we'll get into, is like things change, things happen, and things are not set in stone. Again, hold on to your hold on to your butts, quoting Jurassic Park. We'll get there. So there's plenty of reasons why someone may not want to offer readings publicly. And then, of course, there are some who are just not interested in reading the future period because perhaps they're more interested in the present moment. Reading the future is not something that interests them. Maybe reading the future is something that may even sound a little intimidating, or kind of like, oh, I don't really want to know that. I just want to be able to go through life and take it as it comes. Again, there's lots of different reasons. And then another one may be that the psychic just may not believe in predictions. And yes, that can absolutely happen. Just because you're psychic, again, it doesn't mean that you believe in future predicting, because psychic is not about future predicting. There are plenty of psychics who do different kinds of work using their, psychic senses, their clair senses, but that doesn't mean that they believe in predicting a future that is set in stone. So, the reason why I wanted to go back, the reason why I included the definition for omniscient in the beginning list that I had given earlier, it's because I feel like a lot of folks confuse psychic for being omniscient. And I feel like this comes from a misconception of how psychics work, given how media has portrayed psychics. So, my favorite examples to use, because I have two examples that I love to reference. It's not like the Disney TV show That's So Raven, and it's not like the Christopher Walken film Phenomena. So if you know either of these two references, this is going to make a lot more sense. If you don't, I apologize. I will try to walk you through it. In the show That's So Raven, the whole plot of the show is that we have a character who has the psychic sense to be able to see in their mind's eye, almost like a little movie clip, like it's literally a clip from the show that hasn't happened yet. And that clip plays out for them as if they're watching it in third person. And they just get a brief glimpse of an exact clip of what is going to happen, but they have no context for that clip. And that's where the comedy ensues in this show. I love this show. I grew up on it. It was amazing. I still love it to this day. So the idea behind the show is like the comedy ensues because Raven gets this psychic download and then either tries to force it to happen or tries to force it to not happen. But no matter what, Raven cannot avoid the outcome that is the clip. It will always happen, no matter what. It is set in stone. Raven cannot avoid whatever that clip that plays out is. Phenomena is a movie in which Christopher Walken's character gets into an accident and wakes up out of a coma many years later. Many years? 8 year? I don't remember. But wakes up out of a coma and has the ability to touch a person. And then, much like That's So Raven, Christopher Walken's character can see a movie clip play out in his head of something that has not happened yet, but is going to happen exactly as it's going to happen. The difference is Christopher Walken's character is seeing things that are happening to other people after he touches them. And Christopher Walken's character has the ability to change that outcome because in Christopher Walken's story, Phenomena, um, that future is not set in stone. However, it does happen. It just might change and it may be variable, which is a little more believable to me. But still, the point is, psychics are shown as being able to see with complete clarity, without a doubt, the exact thing that is going to happen that is unavoidable. And they know everything that's going to happen. And this is where I believe the public conscious starts to project fortune telling onto psychics because that is so often what is shown instead of all the other stuff, which is just a matter of Hollywood, and that's fine. But it's this issue that we run into a lot of times with any kind of paranormal, psychic, metaphysical, witchcraft. Anytime it's portrayed in media, it's done in a Hollywood style, which is fun and it's entertaining, but that's it. It's just entertainment. But a lot of people don't realize that these are based off of real experiences, real belief systems, real practices, and then just cranked up to 1,000. And they take it as either it doesn't exist at all or it has to be cranked up to 1,000, like how it is in Hollywood, instead of realizing that there is that gray area in between where it's like, yes, but. So, you know, when this happens, when people have this, idea that a psychic is omniscient, meaning they know everything, people think that, and I have been told this, people have told me that they think that I can read their every thought that's running through their mind in that moment, and that I can see their deepest, darkest secrets, and that I can see both the past, the present, as well as the future. And by present, I mean like what is happening in your life right now and is like in the process of happening and telling you about that. Everything, everything. And that's simply not what it is. And there are a lot of ethical reasons behind this as well that we will get into in another episode about being an ethical reader, which I am very passionate about. I have a lot of ideas on. But, one of the things that I like to tell people when they say, oh my gosh, you're going to know every exact detail, every exact perfect, like, movie played out, you're going to know everything, is, if you've ever heard of the word psychic impression or um, an impression in general when it comes to talking about sensing intuitively, like sometimes you might hear a reader say, I get the impression, I get the feeling. And the reason why is because it's exactly that. It's a loose impression rather than a clear, defined, exact answer. When psychics, when intuitives are sensing into things, it's never one to one exact, without a doubt. There's gonna be some gray area. There's gonna be things that don't quite make sense. It's very much dreamlike, where, like in a dream, you may have a very symbolic dream that represents things, but is not one to one. And you can dissect those things and you can translate those things so that way it does make sense, but it's extremely rare that it is one-to-one exact. It can happen, but it's not like this is an everyday occurrence for every psychic where they are going to know the exact details every single time. Because when we are receiving things, it's more this kind of gray area where we're translating and we're decoding. And that's why it's more of a conversation between the psychic intuitive source, universe, whatever you want to call it, and then the other person, their energy, and that other person's input. Because it's a whole conversation that works between all these different things to bring clarity to what is being received intuitively and psychically. It's not exact one to one. Like I said, it can be, but that's very rare. One of the examples that I have about people thinking that I'm, as a psychic, omniscient was, the elections. Unfortunately, I had many people asking me before the results came in who I saw winning. And after the results came in, I had a lot of people asking me what I saw psychically happening next and how bad it was going to be and what it was going to be like. And I had to actually, the influx of people sending me questions right before and right after was so intense that I had to make a TikTok video, which you can go and watch, telling people like, hey, we need to be present. If you're scared about what's going to come in the future because of the circumstances we find ourselves in currently, we need to get present so we can take action. Because the last thing that we need is somebody coming in and saying a prediction that most people, again, are going to think is set in stone and there's no changing it, right? So, you know, I've talked about it in the past episode about dream premonitions. Have I had premonitions that I've seen play out? Yes. Have I received psychic predictions about events that came true? Absolutely. However, just because I can do these things, it doesn't mean that I am comfortable with doing them for other people or sharing what I receive with other people. To quote Stevie Nicks, I keep my visions to myself. And, I can look back at my dream journal from years ago and I could see predictions that I made that I didn't realize were predictions. I was just like, well, here's a weird dream where I got this very exact date and this very exact information about how this thing that I have no attachment to, but is very much affecting a lot of people. And I can see, I wrote it down in my dream journal and I can see how it actually came true now that it's been like years and I can see what the outcome was. But I don't publicly go about sharing those things. And there's a lot of different reasons for why I don't share that I kind of already tapped into. But one of the main reasons is the reason why I don't do fortune telling, prediction of the future for clients is because I'm more interested in the present moment that we find ourselves in. I'm more interested in what guidance can I give my client to meet them where they are right now in the present moment, in their present situation, so that way they can move forward feeling empowered. So that way they can move forward feeling like inspired and motivated rather than feeling bogged down and beholden to the unseen force of a predetermined fate. I have unfortunately also had my share of readers giving me predictions that were extremely terrifying that never came true. And I've mentioned this, I think, before on the podcast, but um, I had gotten a reading from a tarot reader before my wedding, and this tarot reader had told me that I was going to get pregnant in the very immediate future, like within a few days or something like that of my wedding. And this really freaked me out because I was not interested in having kids and it was not something I was planning on. And so I was like, well, I tried to give kind of some clarity to, oh, I told the reader, well, me and my partner are considering adopting a kitten sometime soon. Like we've been talking about it, and that's our fur baby. And this reader said, no, I'm not talking about a pet. I'm talking about your body is ready to give birth. Physically, you're going to give birth. And this really, really, really freaked me out to the point that it really affected my mental state for the following week or two. And then, when you know it, later that week, we just so happened to adopt a kitten that we were not planning. And then later, I found out that I have endometriosis and uh, physical birth is not really an option for me. And it's not healthy or safe for me. I'm not going to get into my health issues, but the point is that, and I'll talk more about this on the ethics of being a psychic, but predictions can weigh so heavy on people if they are presented in ways that can be not healthy for the client. if it's not helpful, if it's stressful, to some people, hearing that, oh, you're going to have a baby is great news. But for other people like myself, it was not great news. It was not what I wanted to hear or needed to hear. Similarly to being told that, your loved one is going to pass away. That's another prediction that I have heard that at this point, it had been many years since the last time I got a really bad prediction that never came true, that I had to be like, okay, well, I don't appreciate this reader telling me that. Um, and I'm not accepting this kind of reading where it's a very fear-based tactic. And even if you do receive that kind of information, that's not the most appropriate way to deliver that information. There are better ways to do it. And like I said, we can talk about that more in a future episode. But, you know, for me personally, I notice a few things when it comes to future predicting. And that's, first and foremost, they don't always happen the way that we think it's going to happen. So even when we do get a prediction, it may play out quite differently than we had seen it playing out, whether that was a prediction we got in a dream or just like a random knowing at some point. It's never going to be exact like that's so Raven. It's never going to be the phenomena effect. It's never going to be like watching a movie clip and then it's one to one. And if it is, again, it's very rare, but it's not going to be that way every single time. We may get a prediction that says one thing only to discover after events unfold that maybe we misinterpreted the prediction, which I have absolutely had happen myself, where I got a prediction, a premonition, and then I had misinterpreted it. But after the fact, I looked back and I was like, oh, I took this symbolism and I was applying it in a different way. It wasn't accurate because I was taking it too literally, or I wasn't taking it literally enough, or whatever. So, this is another reason why, when it comes to predicting the future, like I said, when it comes to any kind of psychic work, it's that gray area. It's this ambiguous liminal space, this in between of like, well, we cannot say with 100% fact and knowing. And anybody, and I'm pretty sure I've said this on the podcast before, anybody who claims to know something when it comes to psychic work, paranormal, witchcraft, spiritual beliefs, metaphysical, whenever it comes to any of these topics, and someone is claiming to know something with 100% certainty, without a shadow of a doubt, as if it is fact, I would be very cautious and I would question that, because that's dangerous. Because, even me at the beginning of this episode, I'm telling you, this is based off of my experience and my belief. You don't have to believe it. You don't have to agree with me. That's fine, because it's going to be different for everybody. And the honest truth of it is nobody knows. Nobody can say for 100% certainty. Nobody knows. So the other thing is that when it comes to future predicting, and I've mentioned this in the dream premonition episode, oftentimes those premonitions and those predictions only make sense after it has happened. Only afterwards can we look back and say, oh, I see. Okay. Maybe you didn't even think it was a prediction or a premonition, but once it's happened, it hits you like, oh, that was a thing that I had. I had no idea. I was not expecting that. That's a very normal occurrence. And this is why, at least for me personally, the idea of being able to tap into that idea of I'm going to predict something for someone, I'm going to tell their future, makes it harder for me because, again, it's very symbolic and it can be misinterpreted very easily. And one of my favorite examples in this kind of situation to give is, think about Greek mythology. Think about all these wonderful Greek stories that we have. How many times has the oracles, how many times have oracles in these stories told someone something and it wasn't exactly as the person interpreted it to be? It wasn't the exact way they thought it was going to play out. And yes, they may have ended up causing their own fate. And yes, this plays into that idea again of like it's unescapable, inescapable. But the idea here being that just because something is presented in one way doesn't mean it's going to happen the way you think it is or the way you expect it to. And in many of these Greek stories, a lot of these people ended up kind of falling into the trap of trying to, it's the That's So Raven effect. Really, I feel like That's So Raven's just based off of a lot of Greek myth about oracles. Wow, this is just now hitting me. Welcome to my revelation about That's So Raven and the crossover between Greek mythology and the Oracle of Delphi. But anyways, so I just got so frazzled by my own revelation that I lost track. So again, it isn't to say that we're stuck in fate and that there's no escaping it, but in these examples, it was presented in a way that this person thought they could avoid it or they could change it, and it didn't actually happen the way that they thought that it would happen. They misinterpreted the information. They took it as one thing and then it ended up being something else, but it still ended up being kind of accurate, right? Um, so yeah, a lot of times we don't even see these things play out until long, long afterwards. Like I was talking about earlier, I go through my dream journal and I've have my dream journals that date back to like 2020, 2020, 2019, 2018. Oh, I forget. But point is, I have my dream journals for quite some time. And sometimes I'll open them up and flip through them, and I will just notice that one of my things ended up being a premonition. And when I wrote it down, I had no idea. And I will highlight that section. But I mean, this is years later, and I'm just only now realizing, like, oh, wow, that was a very accurate prediction. That was a very accurate premonition. But in the moment, I had no idea that's what it was. And even if I have an inkling of thinking, like, maybe this is a premonition or a prediction, I will simply make a note of it and be mindfully aware of it, but I won't take it as absolute law or truth or fact until I see it play out. And again, this is just how I work, and this is my personal way of doing things. So, take it with a grain of salt. When it comes to fortune telling, I like to think of it like the weather. This is how I like to describe it to people when they sit down for any kind of reading. So stick with me here on this analogy. And by the way, I do want to acknowledge this analogy I actually learned from the wonderful astrologer Jessica Lanyadoo. Love Jessica. And this is something that I kind of learned from her that she used in regard to astrology, but it can honestly be used for any kind of psychic prediction work, right? So it's like the weather. We can predict the weather so that way we can make plans for whether or not we might need an umbrella, or maybe we can actually have that picnic if it's a sunny day. But sometimes the weather forecast, those weather predictions are wrong. And we maybe didn't even need the umbrella because maybe it didn't even rain at all. But the point was that we were prepared. And the opposite can be true. Sometimes it rains on our picnic when we thought it was going to be sunny. So the same can be used and applied towards predictions, towards any kind of psychic reading. And this is how I describe it. Again, when people sit down for a reading with me, I tell them, like, hey, look, we're tapping into the energies of possibility. That doesn't mean these things are set in stone. It just means, like, hey, here's a heads up. Do with it how you will. If you want to take this information and do something, fantastic. If nothing changes, all right, then this is possibly the way the energy might go if nothing else happens, if we stay the course. But if you choose to do something else and take matters into your own hands, maybe that might change. So, you know, I find that many folks have a hard time with this concept of it's more like a weather forecast than actual future predictions set in stone because they believe that there's one set path that we are meant to be on and that our fate is unchangeable and predetermined. Now, everybody is allowed to have their own belief systems, and if that's what people believe, that's fine. But when it comes to getting fortunes told, predictions, or even just tarot readings and psychic readings, maybe just getting a tarot reading for guidance, you know, getting stuck in this frame of mind of there is only one set path. Either all or nothing, fate is unchangeable, it actually, I notice, causes a lot of fear in people. And this is actually the number one reason why people tell me to my face why they're so afraid to get a reading from me. They're afraid that I'm going to tell them that something bad is going to happen and that they will not be able to change the predicted outcome because they believe it's going to be set in stone. And whether or not they believe, that I'm the one setting it in stone or that it is set in stone and I'm simply just telling them, it really depends on the person. But I have literally had people tell me, um, when I've been approached at different markets or events, one person may be really interested in getting a reading, and another person may be very, very frightful. Or sometimes people will even kind of come up and hesitate and be like, well, I'm afraid you're going to tell me something bad. Well, I'm afraid that you're going to predict something bad. And the thing is, again, we'll talk about this in another episode, but even if I did predict something bad, it would be unethical to share with the client something like death, right? And, that's a whole other topic about being unethical psychic, but you can still present information that is not great in a way that's digestible, in a way that's easier for the person to receive the guidance that they need without feeling overwhelmed and doom and gloom. And one of my favorite examples to give is my mediumship teacher, my advanced mediumship teacher, Danielle Saren. Oh my gosh, I will put her name in the description. I don't remember how to say her last name. I apologize, but um, she is the Squamish medium online. And one of the stories that she shared in the advanced mediumship class I took was, she was in a session with someone and she got a psychic ping, a psychic download, whatever you want to call it, that this person's loved one was going to pass away. And sometimes, she would get the feeling of like, this isn't information for them to know. This is just information for me to know so I can better like work with them in this setting. But she got this information and felt like she needed to share it. So instead of just blatantly saying, a loved one of yours is going to die, like, that's it, no guidance, no nothing, just really blunt and kind of like a slap across the face. Instead, what she said was like, I'm getting the feeling that like connecting with family at this time might be good. Do you have this family member that you haven't talked to in a while? When was the last time you connected with them? I would, reach out to them, see how they're doing, maybe spend some time with them. It could be really good for you at this current state to connect with those people that you love. And then months later, that person turned around and contacted my teacher and said, I'm so glad you recommended that I spend time with that family member because if I hadn't, I wouldn't have gotten to see them before they passed. And how they passed was unexpected and sudden. They didn't know it was going to happen. It was, again, this prediction this person had. Not to say that it's set in stone, but the idea here is even if you receive information that is sensitive, we don't want to present it in a way that's a slap in the face. Again, this is a whole other topic that we could get into, but people have this belief that if I say something, that is law. And that falls back into this idea that people think that psychics are omniscient, and they're not. This way of thinking of all or nothing, it has to be, can be a very dangerous and slippery slope. Um, I recently made a TikTok video where I was talking about a premonition that I had, and someone had left a comment about, whether or not it was how it's hard for them to decipher whether or not it's a premonition or manifestation of their negative thoughts. And that can be, again, that can be a very slippery and dangerous slope, that way of thinking. Because the last thing we want to do is fall into the idea that we are manifesting our own issues that are outside of our control. We are manifesting our own situations that are not healthy for us. Not to say that never happens, but for example, as someone who is a disabled witch, in the witch community, I often will hear that I manifested my own chronic illness and chronic pain because of my thoughts or because I attracted it to me, which is simply not true. And that's where we get into that slippery slope. So this is very similar to this idea of all or nothing thinking of predetermined fate. We can believe in predetermined fate. If that is your belief, that's fine. But what I would caution against is getting so stuck on the idea of predetermined fate that when it comes to any kind of prediction, that it is absolute without a doubt set in stone, because that can slip into, again, some more negative thinking, more negative territory that can be unhealthy and harmful. So, all of this to say, for me personally, I believe that, you know, when it comes to predictions, we, we have like us having an unchangeable future, one that is set in stone, predestination. I don't believe that that exists. I don't believe that there is such a thing as this unchangeable, set in stone predestination. I believe that energies are always shifting and changing. And for every choice that is made, whether that choice is made by you or by other people, which then affects you, there's a reaction to those choices. And for every action, whether or not that action was in your control, causes another reaction. And all of these things create a ripple effect that expands ever outward within a stream. And that stream itself has many different pathways of possibility, just like any kind of river or stream. There's so many different offshoots, right? It's not just one direction. There's going to be different branches from that stream. So while we may gain brief glimpses of what may be ahead in the stream, in the path, sometimes that ripple can change the course of our direction in that stream. And sometimes the stream will branch out into new unexpected territories and the current will take us a different direction. That's my personal belief around predictions. I believe that predictions and fortune telling is to some extent, again, like the weather, we can predict the weather. We can kind of forecast what's possibly ahead and tap into the energies of what it feels like. But because it's that ambiguous gray zone that I've been talking about, that liminal in between space, that, possibly, it means that we have an idea and we can try to navigate it to the best of our abilities within the control that we do have, but still understanding that things will be out of our control and that that ripple effect from other people, other situations, other circumstances, the world will affect us in turn, just like our choices affect others. That's how I personally like to view these things. So again, it's not that I don't believe that predictions, are can't happen. And a really good example of that is harkening back to that bad reading that I had where that person told me I was going to give physical birth. Now, I don't believe, obviously, that wasn't true. I didn't believe that was true. I was scared though. But I did end up adopting my cat, who I call my child, my fur baby. Like, I absolutely love her to pieces. She was my first cat. She's the best. She's great, Madam Mim. So I believe that there was some truth to it. But when they tried to get hyper specific and detailed about how it was going to play out and how it was going to be, as if it was fact. That was the issue. So by keeping it in this gray zone of like, hey, I'm sensing, I'm getting this psychic impression, I'm getting the impression, I feel, I'm sensing that you may possibly have this new um, companion in your life, entering your life in this way, but keeping it ambiguous enough of like, we're not really sure how that's going to play out, but that to me feels more comfortable than saying outright like, oh, well, this is it, matter of fact, 100%, because that may not even happen. So let me know, what were your experiences with having predictions? Did you have predictions go extremely on point and well? Did you have predictions go kind of wonky and weird? Um, Let me know if you had predictions yourself or if they were given to you, what your thoughts and feelings are about them. I'd love to hear if you'd love to share your stories. I would love to read them. I hope that this episode brought some insights, hearing someone else's thoughts, opinions, and beliefs around this topic. Hopefully, it opens your mind to possibility. It opens you up to using your discernment so you can ask yourself, now that you've kind of heard me talk about this topic, use your own discernment and ask yourself as you walk away from this, how do I feel about predictions and premonitions? How do I feel about the idea that not all psychics are fortune tellers and not all fortune tellers, are 100% accurate 100% of the time to the exact detail? And what are my personal beliefs around that? What do I think about these topics? Because again, don't take my discussion here as 100% fact and I'm 100% correct, because that's just simply not true. But these are my personal beliefs and ideas. So I invite you to sit and reflect on those topics and see what you come up with for yourself. So thank you again for joining me on this episode of the podcast. I will see you next time. Thank you for joining me on this magical, mystical journey within the Oracle Parlor. It has been such a pleasure to have you. And please, if you have questions or a spooky story that you would like to share with the podcast, email oracleparlorpod@gmail.com. If you would like to learn more from me, Fantasma Witch, head over to my Patreon. There are free memberships as well as paid memberships where you can get access to monthly magical workshops, Q&A, behind the scenes, and so much more. Don't forget, you can also book a reading directly with me, whether that's tarot, palm reading, pet communication, or even mystical intuitive consultations. You can find all that and more on my website, phantasmawitch.com. That's FANTASMAWITCH.com. You can also find me on Instagram at Fantasma Witch, as well as TikTok at Fantasma Witch. And if you aren't listening to this on YouTube, you can also find me there at Fantasma Witch. If you enjoyed the podcast, please, please, please make sure you leave a rating, share it with people you know. It really helps out. Thank you again, and I will see you witches in the next episode.